Hey. So, how's everybody doing? With me today, and I want to talk about a Netflix mini-series called American Murder, the Gabby Petito. It's the Gabby Petito story. It's only 3 parts, and it is a story that I had followed when it first came out, and I think they did the benefit of this was everything was together in a cohesive line that you could follow, whereas before, you were piecing things together through different YouTube videos and news stories and things like that, and the story that they told was pretty good. I think there was additional footage in this series that I had not seen in the previous different ways that I was watching the story, particularly with the body cam from the police officers that pulled them over in Moab. And so I guess before I get into what I want to talk about, I'll just do a recap of what happened. So it was Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. They were 2 young people in their 20s, and they set off across America to do a video log of van life. So they bought a van and they fixed it up and made it like a little mini camper, and they were going all over the United States. Mostly out west, from what I could tell, is where most of their footage was. And, just talking about what it was like to live in a van. It's kind of a common thing that people are doing now. And that's what she wanted to do as a career. And I'm not sure why he was tagging along, other than the fact that they were engaged to be married. So they go off, and she's doing her videos, and she's still communicating with her parents. And all of a sudden things went quiet, and that's where her parents started getting concerned, and they put out a missing persons report. And Brian flies home. Well, he said he flew home, but then her van shows up at home, and Brian's parents are doing very little as far as offering any help or information on what happened to Gabby, and people are using social media to try to find her. Her father's doing news, things on the news to put the message out there. And about the time that they're getting ready to arrest Brian Laundrie, because they did eventually find her body, and it became a homicide case at that point. At the same time that they were trying to arrest him, he had gone missing. So now they're looking for him. Okay? And eventually they find him as well. Okay, so that's the story in a nutshell. There's a lot of details left out, but there's also lots of information out there. And I actually recommend that you watch the show, even if you've been following the case and you know a lot about it. It's very well done, I feel. There's a lot of footage, and like I said, some things that I had not seen before, particularly with the police footage when they were pulled over in Moab. And that's what happened. So they were in Moab, they had an argument. Another couple called the police because they saw Brian slap Gabby. And you can hear the 911 call. And they're telling the police officer, or the 911 dispatch person, where they saw him, which way they were going, and gave him the vehicle description and so on. And not far down the road, Brian was driving, and he bumps a curb while he's driving, and so the police pull him over, and that's when they put 2 and 2 together and realized this is the couple that was involved in that domestic dispute. And so they pulled them both out of the vehicle, and they put Gabby in the back of her car, one of the police cars, and she's crying and she's upset and she's taking responsibility for how this whole thing went on, and saying it was her fault. And Brian, on the other hand, he's kind of laughing it off and acting like he's not really bothered by it, and saying, she just gets wound up. And he never admitted to slapping her, but he did say he pushed her. Okay? And so the police observe on both of them various injuries. Okay? None of them were major, but they both had marks on their bodies. And so they're discussing it, and they're not really sure what to do, how to handle it. And I kind of get where they're coming from. It's two young people. They don't want to, do something that's going to ruin their lives, like arresting them. And I have my opinion on this, and I'll give it to you in just a second. It looks like they were having a spat. Is kind of how, it didn't come across that way. That's not the word they used, but that's kind of the feel that I got for them. Like, they were trying to be sympathetic towards both people. So they let Gabby stay in the car and go camping for the night, and they tell her to go, a place to go get a shower. That, the one cop's wife has anxiety, and showers help her relax. And they put Brian up in a hotel for the night. So then, and this is so quick and so subtle in this movie or series or whatever, they didn't even wait. They were told to stay separated for the night, get some breakfast tomorrow, and then talk about it. But they didn't do that, okay? The way it sounded in the video or the movie or the show or whatever you want to call it, to me, is that later on that night, they got back together and headed off to the next location that they were going to. So they didn't listen to the cops. And they headed on, and a couple weeks later, Gabby is no longer with us. All right. So here's my thoughts on this. I think this is so vitally important, okay, that we do more and everything that we can to make the public and the people aware of domestic violence. There's another thing I wanted to point out, because there's a really interesting contrast throughout this series. Excuse me. There's two girls that were friends with Gabby and Brian. One's a blonde and one's a brunette. And the blonde, she was more friends with Gabby. And the other one seemed like she was friends with both of them. And the blonde friend always kind of had this weird feeling about Brian. And the brunette, she didn't see it coming at all. And that's why I'm saying this is very interesting, because I think this is the problem that we have. Like, she wasn't completely stupid. Like, she knows that there's such a thing as domestic violence, and I'm talking about the brunette. In the end, she was very sad about what had happened to her friends, but the point of her lack of understanding was even to the point where Gabby's missing. Her name is all over social media and the news, and her and her friends kind of made a joke that they probably threw the phones in the ocean and just went off the grid. You know what I'm saying? Like, she didn't take it seriously, and I'm not faulting her for it. I'm going to say it's more of a lack of understanding at this point, and that's what I'm trying to say. This is why it's so important for people to understand. So, including the law enforcement. Okay? So here's what I think should have happened. and I'm going to elaborate a little bit on this in a more personal way in just a moment, in a couple different ways. But just from a practical standpoint, I personally think that the police should have arrested both of them. That's what I think. And I'll tell you why. That night in jail and going through all that process for both of them may have been enough to wake at least one of them up to say, look, this is gotten out of hand. We need to just put an end to this. And then the likelihood of both of them being here, they probably would both be here and not gone. Okay? That's my thought. I'm not saying that Gabby was not a victim. She was, okay? She was a victim. And sometimes getting the hard knock might be the thing to wake you up or give you the strength to do what you need to do to protect yourself. That's why I'm saying that about her. So, not to punish her, but to give her a wake-up call. But they didn't do that. And it's just sad. I mean, it's sad because they did show where the police officers were all talking it over, and they thought that they were doing the best things for these two kids, but they really weren't. And I know my way seems kind of harsh, but I can tell you that when you're in a situation where you are being abused, these things don't happen overnight, okay? You don't go out on a date with somebody and they slap you and you're like, oh, I'm in love. That's not how it works, okay? There have been months and months and months and probably years of grooming, I'm going to say it that way, or conditioning or brainwashing. I used to call it brainwashing. That goes into the psyche of somebody that makes them vulnerable to be abused. Okay? How do I know this? I'm going to be honest with you. I think there's actually something somewhere in the middle of all of my old videos that talks about me being a survivor of domestic abuse. And I was. 2 relationships, my mother and one of my ex-husbands. So I do have some understanding of what was going on in Gabby's brain and how hard it is to get away. And each situation is different. Had things not worked out the way they were for me, I would have stayed, and who knows, I may have been driven to cause harm to my ex-husband, because that's what happens. You take so much and eventually you strike back, or you end up dead. I mean, those are the 2 options, right? So the reason why I say we need more awareness in the general public, but also with professionals, this is another thing that I've seen happening in my personal life. So if you might be new here, but Ray, my partner, he is a double amputee, and this happened over the course of about 5 years, where he was in and out of the hospital for different smaller surgeries until he eventually lost both of his feet. And up until COVID, every time he had to go to the hospital, of course, I'm the person that was taking him there. And I would be there with him until, it was time for me to go. And so I was there through the whole intake process. And one of the questions they asked him without fail is, do you feel fear for your safety at home? And they're asking him that question right in front of me, when I'm most likely the person who's going to be abusing him. If I was doing that, I'm not. But do you understand what I'm saying? And of course, he's saying no because he's not being abused. But if I put myself in his shoes and one of my abusers was with me, I probably would have said no too. Because, first of all, you're caught off guard. Second of all, Your abuser's right there. Most people do not come out and say, yeah, this guy beats me every day, or this woman, and women can be abusive too. I want to say that, but I don't know why they ask him that question every single time, right in front of me. I even said something to somebody sometime. I was like, what if I was abusing him? Do you really think he'd answer you? He probably wouldn't. You should maybe think about your process on that. It's a step in the right direction. They are asking so that they can put things in place to help people who are being abused. But we got a long way to go. And I know my way probably sounds really, really mean. I don't mean it to. I don't mean it to. But 2 people are gone. And they did say that, and it's the truth, that we're never going to know what really, really happened. Because there's nobody here to tell the story outside of what, the evidence says. So, anyway, that's my thoughts on that.